Cool. So this week we're going to kind of talk about some of the challenges and how we're trying to overcome them when it comes to the community research. Obviously, trying to do a community project or community-led piece of work during a time of another wave has been interesting. And here's how we're going to try and tackle them, but also maybe have a little bit of a call for action at the end if you have any other further contacts for us. So to start off, just to touch on a couple of the things we mentioned at the end of the session last week. We've been really trying to tap into some of the wider movement. So how we've done that is we've had some meetings with the French Red Cross, but also reading more into the Burundi Red Cross and also looking at the Swedish Red Cross and looking at some of the common themes. So it's been interesting to look across all of them and see what are the common themes running across. And one of them being relevant volunteer roles. So that's something one of the French Red Cross's main aspects were looking at roles that actually were what was needed in the community and what drove the community as well. There also seems to be a real mixture of how to turn centralized frameworks into like locally implemented outcomes and outputs, and how we can maybe understand and learn from those, as well as the longevity of funding. We mentioned it and touched on it last week, but the level of funding that's needed for a community to have support long term is it's not easily obtainable from grants. So that's just something that we're kind of aware of. And then something we've been trying to look into as well is what other perform metrics are and how do the community currently feel and interact. So we were looking for different ways of measuring this and how's the best way to tackle this piece of work. And through a little bit of digging, we found that the American Red Cross has a really awesome community resilience tool. So that's kind of what we're going to harness to immediately work with the community, and it'll be part of our interview process. That's kind of just a touch on a few of the wider movement things. Vincent from the French Red Cross had a really great quote from our conversation this week, which is having more of a horizontal view where the French Red Cross becomes a citizen's platform of tools and empowers people to act and have the resilience to act amongst yourself. So that's kind of almost where they're seeing the French Red Cross going, rather than being traditional humanitarian aid of the French Red Cross giving. How can they become a platform which just empowers people locally to act and become more resilient? Which is something that we really liked the theme of. So I'll hand over to Sarah now, take you through some of the research stuff.
Cool. So the main focus for all of the community approach is to try and understand the strengths and needs of different communities across the UK. So the two identified communities that we've been looking at so far are Neath and Nelson. So Neath in Lancashire, Nelson's in Lancashire, Neath's in Wales. I knew I'd got that wrong. And we're also looking at a third location in Cornwall to be confirmed. So for the next slide, I think we're looking at trying to best tackle research done remotely. So we've got three approaches that we're going to be taking. The first is going to be remote interviews on Zoom. The second is community activity packs that Charlotte will talk you through. And the third is citizens' assemblies. So that will act as focus groups. And Charlotte will give you a bit more information on that. So with the interviews, we're looking to try and get 4 different groups of people. And this is to help us get a nice spread across the communities. So the 4 groups are high risk groups. So these include people seeking employment, have underlying health conditions, or maybe single parents or in sheltered accommodation, people at different stages of life, such as new parents, commuters, retirees, and then public sector staff and people working in the voluntary sector. And there'll be 30 interviews per place.
Cool. So the second thing we, as a approach we're using is community activity packs. So the reason why we're using these is our original plan when starting this work was that we'd be able to actually ingrain our work in the community. We'd actually be able to visit, observe, and as you can see from the slide, interviews are great to help us understand what people say and think. We were hoping to be able to do observations, but obviously with the second wave of coronavirus, both of our locations are either in tier 3 or they're in the firebreak lockdown in Wales. So both are in the highest level of lockdown, so we aren't able to go and visit. which led us to the more generative technique side. So the benefit of this is it helps us understand more about what people are like feeling or dreaming, and especially when it comes to a community-led approach, this is really important to us because we want to understand not only what people's, as we saw at the beginning, the strengths and the needs people are currently feeling, but also where do they see the community going, and what can we do to help like bolster that or be part of that as well. So this is our community activity pack. They're being sent out as we speak. So there's 8 tasks in them, and they range everything from exploring support networks to wishes and goals for the town. There is some more fun sides of stickers and a little bit of colouring and drawing. And kind of the idea is that the activities themselves are a little bit more creative than straight interview questions. So it gives people the opportunity to explore things maybe a bit differently. It gives us different insights. For example, the exercise you can see on task 4 just there on the side is write an advert for the best part about Neath. So that's a really great way for us to understand, is it a building, is it a place, is it a community group, what do people see and what is that strength? So hopefully we've piloted a couple of these and we've got some great feedback and adapted them as well. So now with these ones going actually out to the members of the community, we hope to get some real insights into more of the thought processes of the community. Oh, the slide stuck, sorry. And then the last thing is citizens' assemblies. This is actually a more of a local government technique. And the idea is that like 8 to 10 people will be picked at random to join a citizens' assembly. And this is a place where we can really discuss again, what's the goals? Where do we want the community to go? There's a quote from the organization New Local that is, for a community to thrive, they need to know that there needs to be a goal. They need to understand the resource they have to achieve that goal. And they need to have a plan to achieve it. So this is where citizens' assemblies come in for us, really. The idea is we'll be doing this, the pro packs going out at the moment, the interviews will be starting shortly, and the citizens' assemblies will be happening after Christmas. So we're kind of doing them in stages to get different pieces of information to kind of help us piece together our new approach. Take over to Monica.
And yes, as Charlotte already mentioned, ideally we'll be on the ground right now in Wales and in north of England and actually be speaking to people face to face. However, we had to think of different ways to actually collect research and gather insight. At the same time, we had to think of different ways to recruit people to take part in this research, and it had to be mostly done remotely, which is much more challenging than actually going there. So I'm just going to talk you through a few of the challenges we've had. So even during our initial research into these areas, we noticed just a significantly stronger presence in Neath with multiple active Facebook groups, where members of those Facebook groups were actually engaging in the content a lot more than in Nelson. So we had the same pattern follow when we started reaching out. So all of our posts in Neath groups would get a lot more engagement, a lot more comments, people would share them. In Nelson, we'll get a few likes, but people wouldn't reach out as much. The high levels of online engagement definitely helped us, as well as our current contacts in Neath. We had massive help from, for example, Martin, who managed to find us so many great contacts to speak to. He's currently on the call. But however, at the same time, we've been struggling to find the same in Nelson. Again, we spoke to lots of useful contacts and British Red Cross representatives. However, we didn't manage to find as many people take part in our research. And this comes as no surprise because communities are different, their online presence is different. And obviously right now with the area being in tier 3, there are much different priorities that people have. So not everybody kind of like sees like engagement in research as something that will benefit their community, which is why we have found, even though we've tried different methods, so reaching out on social medias like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, emailing, we have found that giving a call is usually the best way to reach out to people because you don't waste their time as much. They can straight away say if they're interested or not. And it's usually like a much faster way to get engagement and for them to see kind of like the importance of taking part as well. However, we do need to continue this and we do need to try new methods, which is why we're depending on our networks and on your networks as well. So if you can help us with any contacts in Nelson, that would be absolutely amazing. We do accept help for Neath, of course, and for Cornwall in the future. However, we're currently more struggling to recruit in Nelson, predominantly in the voluntary sector. So if you have any connections in the voluntary sector, that would be absolutely amazing. And then also people in the high-risk categories. And by high risk, we mean people who are currently seeking employment, maybe you have friends or relatives with underlying health conditions in the area, single parents, people on benefits, somebody who lives close to a river and it's in risk of flooding, or people in shelter accommodation and care homes. Or obviously this is not an exhaustive list. If you have any other connections that might be willing and happy to speak to us, we're absolutely happy to speak to anyone really. So yeah, I would really appreciate your help on that. And now Aaron will run you through the next steps.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. So we're just moving into now hiring 2 local members of staff. So we've had the adverts up. They're up again until next week. So we're hopefully going to get some applications for those roles and start the interview process in the next few weeks for that. Charlotte is sending out a second batch of culture packs this evening. So they will be going out to participants and with them this week. We're also recruiting local participants, you just heard Monica say, actively looking for more people to speak to in these communities. We're also looking at our 3rd and final pilot location in Cornwall that we're working with Helen and the ops team down in Cornwall on. And yeah, then we're just going to be starting our interviews. So coming up for the next few weeks. So I will take back through down into the questions then. So I think the first question was from Ainsley that we had come in around the target areas. So we chose our locations based on, well, primarily we started to look at the vulnerability index and looking at areas that had a high ranking on the vulnerability index, had a size of between 20,000 and 75 population. Using that shortlist, we then spoke to local operational teams, so the tactical sales, some local staff and volunteers, checking out and getting their insights on the viability for our work around the community approach and the locations we'd looked at. Based on volunteer engagement, current BRC presence, needs of the communities being aligned to our strategy causes and getting that information really from a local expert. We then went back and spoke to Matt Thomas to make sure, as he's the internal expert on the vulnerability index, run past our choices through him. And we then carried out some further desk-based external research just to make sure that we had chosen the correct locations for the criteria we were looking for. So Ainsley, I hope that answers your question. The next one that I saw was around the volume of packs that we're sending out, hoping to achieve returns on. Charlotte, I don't know if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, sure. So we're actually not sending out a huge amount of them. We're only sending out, it's between 7 and 10. We're still just getting the numbers confirmed. And that's, to be honest with you, depending on how many participants we're finding that are actively happy to do this. Quite a few people, because they are maybe more housebound right now, are just less keen. The pack is really self-containing. It fits into a letterbox and they post it back to us via a prepaid envelope. So in theory, all they need to do is receive it through their door and put it into a post box. But in this time of high stress, we don't want to add on that at all anymore. Also, the packs aren't our main source of information. The interviews are. What the packs are giving us is just a little bit more of that local context. Understanding specifically from the map is going to be really great for us to understand. There are things like, I've got one of the maps here. So like, I don't know if you can see, but we've like given them stickers and labels here, and they label things like places you go often, important parts of the town, places you don't like, places you'd like to change, places you go to feel like part of the community. So that map's going to be really great for us to inform our interviews further. So basically between 7 and 10. I also saw Leah's question there as well, which I can build on at the same time. So in terms of in Neath, we've been speaking to Alison from the Syrian resettlement program. There are currently 2 refugee families in Neath. She feels that at the level of development and settling they're in, she doesn't feel this is the right time to get them involved in the interview stage, but maybe when we get to the citizens assembly side, that's a better time to include them in the work. And in terms of Nelson, there's actually a very large one of the things that drew us to Nelson as a community was the level of diversity. So there is a huge refugee and migrant population there. So we will be directly working with them as well. Young people, again, yes, we are engaging with them. We actually have a young person doing one of the boxes for us in Neath already to try and help us understand how different age groups see the community as well.
Just want to mention also that we've reached out to colleges in Nelson as well. So yeah, we accept any kind of connections somebody might have in these areas. We just want to highlight the ones who are more struggling to recruit in, but we're targeting those groups as well.
And to Emma's question, the roles are advertised via local channels as well as social media. So they've been pushed on Twitter, they've been put onto Wales Online, local job centres, as well as our website and the usual advertising that we use through P&L. So they're out through local channels as well. and obviously they've been pushed to local staff as well. Alessandro's question, how are you going to define the goals and plan for the assemblies you mentioned? Is that a Sarah question or a Charlotte question?
I think Sarah might have mentioned it. Sarah, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I can. But Charlotte, definitely fill in because you're more familiar with this than I am. But at the moment, our goal is to try and collate all of the strengths based on interviews that we've had in Nelson and in Neath, and then based on that come together, try and identify what strengths are, and then facilitate a session that helps people to vision what the future might look like in each of their communities. But Charlotte, definitely build on that if there's anything missing out.
Yeah, I think you kind of got the gist of it. It's the main thing for us is that we want to there's a real asset in all the different ways we're looking at researching, and one-to-one interviews can be fantastic for that, to get to really explore things, but actually communities are groups of people. So the idea is through the interviews, we'll kind of pull out regular themes that are being brought up. Is there a clear divide that we need to maybe address as a community, and kind of work around those different things? So it's hard to say at this point, other than the whole way that we analyze all of the work we're doing anyway is very much in like a thematic analysis and synthesis of the work. So looking at the common themes, looking at things that are being brought up regularly and how can we address those, and that's kind of what we'll bring to the citizens' assemblies.
Emma's point there as well. So Sarah is actually in contact with the liaison lead from Lancashire, speaking about any local connections we have, so that would be really useful. But thanks for the points of the SCP is definitely something we're looking at as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been answered already, sorry if it has, about where we're sharing it. We're trying to share it as far and wide as possible. So Laura will try and get the volunteer centre as well involved as well. We've had a fair bit of feedback and interest from Neath already. Again, Nelson is an area we're struggling to tap into, as Monica mentioned. Neath has probably around 15 Facebook groups that we've managed to find of different kinds of different communities, and we've managed to get quite good level of feedback from them, as well as through contacts like Martin as well. So in terms of getting people in Nelson, it's definitely more of a challenge for us, and as Monica said, we are speaking to the colleges, but because they have an adult learning program as well. Yeah, so we're kind of trying to tap into it, but we'll try the volunteer centre as well. Thank you, Laura.
Any more questions for any more, or we wrap up today's session?
Can I just come in regarding the Nelson? As Charlotte and I have had a couple of conversations, can I correct you, first of all, Aaron, that you didn't interview anybody locally, because we didn't have anyone locally at the time. But the other problem that we've had is that it is now half term in this area. Unfortunately, the two biggest contacts that we've got, one is with the voluntary services and community volunteer service. The head of that has agreed to help us. Also, the community champion for Tesco's has agreed to help us, but both of them are on holiday. I've got meetings with both of them next week. As regards refugees in Nelson, I think you're really talking about refugees in Pendle in a wider area and not in Nelson itself. We don't have all that many. We've done some research on that just recently. And I'm a bit concerned as to what the area is. I think we need to talk about this in future, because Nelson is part of, as we've tried to say, an area, not a pure town of its own. The ethnic, we have a culture of approximately 82%. We've been talking to a DMP this morning of ethnic, what we would call ethnic minority. And we are having problems getting in touch with them, but we're still trying to do it. But as I say, we've had contacts with Charlotte over the last 2 or 3 days. We are trying on that, but it'll be next week before you get any real feedback on it. So yeah, we'll do our best for you, Nelson, but it's very difficult when we haven't got volunteers in the area.
No, of course, Gordon, and yeah, I didn't mention that so far in the conversation, but the reason why we mentioned it here is because obviously we've been speaking privately as well, but just whilst we had a wider audience, if anyone happened to have other contacts, because yeah, as you said, Bob's got a couple of people for us to speak to, and you've mentioned different contacts we've got to next week, but just as we have this opportunity as a wider platform at the moment during the show and tell, we just thought we'd harness the opportunity for a little plea.
Okay.
Don't worry, Charlotte has caught me up on some of those bits, but we'll catch up. Now that I'm back, we'll catch up later.
Sorry, say that again, Aaron.
I said, now that I'm back, we'll catch up later in the week. Charlotte has caught me up. You've spoken to her a few times while I've been off, but I'll catch up with you later in the week.
Okay, all right.
And in terms of the location, we've been trying to, as I mentioned before, it's the reason why we're kind of, we're only a small team and we're trying to tackle understanding a whole community in a time where community work had its own challenges as well. So the reason why we're sticking to Nelson, I understand it's part of a wider space in the same way that Neath has also areas around it as well that we are trying to work out that bounds of. We're trying at the moment to keep the focus in a town. Obviously, there will be people who maybe associate with that town who tap into that area. But also the idea is we're just learning. So we know it won't be perfect. And we know we want to start in one place and kind of grow and learn with that. So, yeah.
Okay. I think we ought to sit down with a map between us. Just explain to you what Nelson is. It's very strange up here in the north.
No, it's all right. Are there any other questions at all? If not, thank you for everyone coming. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything else to wrap up.
Yeah, no, thanks, Charlotte. I think thanks for all your questions. Obviously, in the meantime, as ever, do drop us a message on Teams or email if you have any more questions or want to find anything more out about what we're up to. But other than that, we'll be on our next blog next week and back again in a fortnight for another show and tell.
Cool. Thank you so much for being open and letting us know what you're up to.
Thanks, Derek. And next week, well, next fortnight, hopefully we'll also have some insights from our first rounds of interviews as well, and the pro pack should come back, so it should be quite an interesting show and tell next time as well if you're still interested.
I'm a bit concerned about the packs actually, Charlotte. Sorry to be negative, but you've asked me to get contacts with people like doctors and MPs and people like that. I honestly can't see them doing little drawings for us.
No, of course.
Let's outside of this, Gordon, because it's not the same thing. So those packs aren't going to MPs and doctors.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, no worries at all. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, everyone.